Hey guys, my name's Sam. I work at a local digital agency just across the tracks. I'm a dev there, and today I'm going to be speaking about easy custom icon fonts. I was on vacation last month, so hopefully some people are still using icon fonts, and if you are, you're only a month late. So anyway, so there's I might just bust on in. Cool, so you're probably pretty familiar with icon fonts. The big guy being probably Font Awesome. So when you're building a project, a lot of the times you'll just jump in, grab Font Awesome, chuck it in your project. There's also another one, Fontello, which I Googled, and that allows you to kind of use a whole bunch of kind of free standard font families, and just combine them together to make your own kind of custom font based out of like Font Awesome and a couple of other free ones on the web. Font Awesome's pretty heavy, comes with a casual 585 fonts. So whenever you're using that, you've got all of those fonts at your disposal, even if you're only using about 8 of them or something. Fontello is a little bit better, so you can kind of customize and pull down that amount, so you just pick the ones you want and you'll end up with just the ones you want in that pack. So that's kind of a better way to go if you're just going with standard fonts. But generally when you download that, you're probably just going to get a set of fonts and a example HTML on those fonts, kind of an example of all of the fonts, all of the icons within that font. So if we move on to custom, it does the job for some of those sites where you just want to get fonts and get icons in there as easy as possible. So then we move on to getting custom icon fonts. So custom icon fonts is where you want to use your own SVGs, or you want to use unique SVGs from around the web and you want to put them together in your own kind of icon font. So you're going to get the benefit of just having all of the icons you want in one single font family. So that's instead of using, say, like inline SVGs, kind of like from the talk from last month. The cool thing about using your own SVG icon font is that further down the road, if you want to move over to using SVG object stuff, you've also got your SVGs available to you. So at least if you're kind of starting down with custom icon fonts and you download the individual SVGs, you can move on to that later on. The talk from last month's pretty sweet about using those custom icon SVGs. And yeah, it's on the YouTube channel for MelbCSS, and I watched it last night. That's pretty sweet. There's a couple of resources for using your for getting custom icons. So a lot of the time, the guys from downstairs at my work just send me the icons that I need. But if you don't have like the guys downstairs who design icons, these two sites are pretty awesome. They both give you like there's a lot of open source icons on there, and I think there's some premium ones as well, but the licenses vary, so just kind of check out what you're using them for. But there's millions of icons on there. It's a great place to get started if you want to build kind of a custom set of icons for your build. So you've got your icons that you've downloaded or the guys from downstairs have given you. Now, what are you going to do to get them into an icon font? So the way I used to go about it was I would use one of these services. So Icon Moon is probably one of the most popular ones, and that will allow you to kind of, in your web browser, you can upload sets of icons and it will string them together and let you download a icon font to use. It'll also provide you with a CSS file with all of the names and the icons ready to go, puts that in like some nice HTML for you to use, gives you a preview of all the little icons that you put together. It's pretty sweet, and also, depending on the site, will give you like a JSON config so that later on if you want to continue on and add to that group of fonts, you can upload that JSON file and you can continue to add and to remove icons from that set. And that's pretty critical because, as I explained, if you don't have that later down the road, it gets pretty tough. So, being tough, the thing I found probably the worst with that solution is that the icons you have and the icon font you have, you normally just build it once, dump it in your project, and it's good to go. But if you need to kind of come back and update some stuff, like if you don't have that JSON file, you can't like reset up that project of custom icons. So like a project I worked on, I added the icon font with Icon Moon, because one of the limitations with Icon Moon was that if you wanted to manage your font, you had to use the same browser that you used to put the font together. And so I think I'd formatted my computer, didn't have the browser, only had the icon font family, tried some funky tools to upload and like deconstruct the icon font back into like its own single SVGs. That was a mess. Ended up using an icon font with like one extra PNG for like a Facebook icon. So it was a pretty crappy system. And because they live outside the project, it's kind of like you're dependent on a third party. And that becomes troublesome when you've got both like teams working on the project. And you don't know who's generated the font. Was it the designers who generated the font family? Where's it all sitting? So, what is the solution to this? The solution that we're using at our work is Grunt Web Font. So this is a plugin for Grunt, and basically what it will do, in an overview, it'll take a folder of SVG icons and basically bundle them up into a font family for you. And it kind of does all that legwork for you. So that's kind of the URL for it there. But I'll give you the kind of just the overview and then kind of a little bit on top that makes it even easier. So here's your basic Grunt file setup. As you can see, this is like the minimum you need. It's using Node to do some of the work behind the scenes. It's going to generate you just set your directory for the icons that you need. You set the destination where the CSS is going to come out. And then you just run Grunt and bam. So that would be an example of the SVG files. So I think I just used one of those earlier services to download those SVGs. Something to probably remember is if you are using SVGs from different services, you probably want consistent SVGs, otherwise you're going to get some sizing issues when you implement the font. So if you need to, you can always open up those SVGs and just make sure they're the same size, or at least on the same size canvas, and you're probably going to have like less problems going on with that once you do that, kind of like normalize your SVGs basically. Then, once that Grunt task runs, this is the font it outputs. So it generates your font family. It will also generate, I think, the .svg if you want it, and I think I think there's like a WOOF 2 or something. Yeah, so that's just some of the other options in icon font. So here's some CSS, wall of CSS. This is kind of just the first part of the file that it outputs. As you can see, it's throwing out the font face, it's putting all the paths that you specified in the Grunt config. It's setting up the icon itself. And so here's the second part. So in that CSS file, here's all of the CSS it generates for you. So this is using the sudo before selector to set the content for the icon. And as you can see, it just uses the same file names as your SVG. So you've got like a nice one-to-one with the files that you use, and it generates the files that you use and the classes that come out the other end. And then you get also a nice little HTML preview. So there's the icons that I used. And so that's kind of like, that's like the base intro if you're just getting started out of the box and just using CSS with Grunt icon font. And that's like, that gets you most of the way there. But then I don't know who's using like vanilla JS or vanilla CSS anymore. So like the majority are probably using Sass or something else. So icon font has Sass built into it. So if we change up to Sass, you can see that I've just changed the config a little bit. Just ignore the commented out stuff, or just pay attention to it, but just don't focus on it just yet. So as you can see, all I had to set really was the style sheet, changing that to use SAS, changing the destination position, and setting the relative font path. The stuff that's commented out, that's kind of when it gets a bit funkier next. But so just know that to get it into SAS is just 3 lines. And so what that will do is that will output a SAS file for you just to include in your main SAS file. And that will give you all of the same stuff as that CSS file would have done before, but now it's just all in your one compiled file with part of the rest of your compilation of your front-end grunt tasks. So like your SAS, you obviously need your SAS task in there, and then you can uglify it or whatever after that. But if you want to make it easy, like this is probably the next bit that just kind of adds that little bit that makes life a little bit easier. So if you look at these extra bits that are commented out, these are for selecting how the build of the class names are going to get generated in that SAS file. And so you can see here that we're specifying a custom web font template. So really that's just a file, that's the kind of the bootstrap that of the template that the SAS is going to build the kind of CSS structure out of. And this is basically like 95% the same, it's just got a mix in at the bottom that we're going to use. And the template options is just kind of, we're changing up how the basic CSS classes come out at the other end. So, what are we doing to it? We're going to add this little mix-in that a colleague of mine wrote. And he's the one who introduced this to me, and when I started using it I was like, oh, that makes life even easier. So all it really is doing is extending the current, it's just adding a mix-in at the bottom of the style of the icon.sas that icon font's going to generate, and this just allows you to kind of use to pull in an icon anywhere in your style sheet rather than having to use the icon file name in your markup. So basically what this does is it gives you this guy. So instead of having to put your file names in your markup and using your class names, you can just use use that mix-in icon, and there you just specify the name of the SVG file that you want to use, and that's going to throw that on that before element. So it means that if you've got an icon, if you don't name your markup classes to be one-to-one with your icon classes, further down the road, if you needed to change like a category icon from something like a bin icon to like a different shaped bin icon, or if it's like the category name has changed but the markup you've left alone, you can just jump into your CSS and you can just change what icon it's using, and you know which icon it is because the name directly refers to that file name. Like if I jump back to you can see that php-code.svg is the same icon, the same name that I'm using in the mixin. Yeah, and so you can also use the markup as you would with the normal classes, even if like in your HTML, if you don't want to go through the CSS only method. Yeah, and so kind of just to sum it up, using icon font like reduces your dependency on using those web generators. You can have consistency per project. You know exactly what icons there are. You don't have to worry that someone hasn't gone and updated your icon font family without you knowing like what's actually in it or not. You don't have to worry about the JSON. You don't have to worry about having an account with any of it. So like the maintenance, all the icons are just kind of locked per project, and you don't have the headaches of kind of managing it through another service. Yeah, that's all.